Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. I've got my crew here. We are about to break down Texas basketball in this NCAA tournament. March Madness is officially upon us. I'm so freaking excited. I got Ryan, Colin, Austin Taylor in the building. We are going to break down a few different things because there's a lot going on that we got to discuss, and I want to unpack it all for you guys here on Fanatic Perspective. So we are actually going to scout Texas, the Big 12 championship winning Texas Longhorns, who were able to secure a 2 seed in the Midwest region, and kind of break down their path. Also tell the tape for Texas. We're going to issue our predictions, Final Four predictions. And we're also going to talk about a big storyline, big underlying storyline in the Texas basketball community, which is that of Rodney Terry, who is currently our interim head coach. But what is the future of RT, and what does that look like for Texas men's basketball? Quick announcement before we get started, because I'm going to kick it over to the fellows to kind of break us down. We are doing, so our sponsor, Last Stand Hats, shout out to Last Stand Hats, laststandhats.com/fanatic. Use Fanatic10 at checkout to get 10% off on all apparel that you purchase on the website on Fanatic Perspective. But we are actually going to be doing a bracket contest. I'll have the details in the description. Simple group on ESPN.com. If you fill out a bracket there, I'm sure you guys have been doing it. I've been doing it for years, since I was a kid. But go on ESPN.com. Our group is Fanatic Perspective Subs, Last Stand Hats. We have fans of Last Stand Hats on there as our motto. So I will be sending out those instructions as long as you tag myself at FP and Last Stand Hats. For our winner, for the winner of the group, and it's one bracket that you get to submit. So submit your best bracket, the one you feel best, the most confident about, I should say. Whoever wins will get $50 gift card to Last Stand Hats to use on whatever apparel you want to purchase. And I know we're going to throw in some hats in there for all of our fans. So if you want to, kind of compete with us and look at, who you feel good about, lots of interesting teams, really interesting field to look at, hit up laststandhats.com/fanatic. Colin, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
I'm good, man. Looking forward to talking a little bit of Texas basketball, both review and going forward to taking a look at how the Midwest, Colgate, and hopefully that path to the national championship, and as well as hopefully talk through what my Final Four will look like, and obviously disagree with you guys on a few topics. So looking forward to it.
You look confident, brother. So I'm gonna start with you, and I'm gonna kick to Ryan. Walk me through what you're, it's been a crazy season, but a crazy fun season. Everything we know that's happened with Chris Beard, we obviously we won the Big 12 tournament. Just your overall thoughts on this basketball team since we last spoke. It's been a minute, man. So I'm curious to get your thoughts and just walk up to this point.
Yeah, I think when you take a look back at kind of history, right, and us talking kind of before the season started, right kind of when, obviously the Chris Beard situation happened, ultimately what we thought this season could be, I think it was kind of right straight through the goalpost. You take a look at the record, 26-8. I think if you went back to the start of the season and told anybody that they'd be very excited. Going back to our conversation, we were saying, this team could be a 1 seed. This team could be a 2 seed. They're slotted in as kind of the number 2 seed within the NCAA tournament. And all 8 of those losses were quad 1 losses. So you take a look at the record again, 14-8 in quad 1 games. That's only second behind KU. No quad 2, quad 3, or quad 4 losses kind of throughout the season. Then you take a look ahead, this Colgate game is actually quad 3 game. So, I think going in the tournament, it's a lot about how you're playing, what you've played throughout the season, obviously your strength of schedule. So I feel very comfortable kind of going into the round 1 game, knowing that we're kind of a battle-tested program that, finished second kind of within the best collegiate basketball conference within the country, and has kind of the experience that we have on our team to go win, hopefully a few NCAA tournament games and make fans like us proud kind of in the NCAA tournament this year.
You seem pretty hopeful, man. And that optimism that we've kind of struggled with as Texas fans over the years, because this part of the season we've struggled, right? And how long it's been since, it was up until last season where we finally got out of just winning, our first game in the tournament, and how long it's been since we've gotten to the second weekend. Ryan, where's your head at with all this, brother? I know you've been, you've been drinking the Kool-Aid early, and I respect it because, when all things were dark, you were like, nah, we're going to be okay. And so talk to me, brother.
Yeah, we rode the ship for sure. I think, last time we got together was right before conference started, and it actually started pretty shaky, right? The track meet that was in Moody against Kansas State, Tyree Sunner had 27 in that game. I think Marcus was right behind him, and we just were like, uh-oh, the wheels are falling off defensively, right? Like that was going to happen eventually, we thought. Then we turned it around. We won our 6 of our last 8, including the 3 tournament games, and beat the number, 2 overall seed in Kansas twice, both by close to 20 points. And just seeing this last game, even without Timmy Allen, and where we finished and how we were playing through our bigs was something that I know you hit on at the top of the season. Having size that's able to score, able to pass and do things off of that. Christian Bishop and Dylan Dessou played phenomenal in the tournament. Seeing them pick up where they left off. I mean, you look at the last 6 games, obviously we have to talk about our favorite player, I think, Serge Jabari Rice, right? He's that guy. He was our leading scorer in 4 of those last 6, and then Dessou covered the rest in those games. The interesting thing, looking back from beginning of conference, that's important, that I think matters when you're talking about picking your brackets, which we'll get to, is the adjusted offensive number and adjusted defensive number in KenPom. We actually improved from the beginning of conference, and going through the gauntlet that is the Big 12, ended up 18 on the offensive side, which was higher than or better than what we had at the beginning of the Big 12, and then dropped a few spots defensively, but still in the top 15 defensively. So between those 2 things, you look at what the Big 12 was in all of the games, got to be happy to be a Longhorn today and know that we were able to cap that off.
Are you concerned? I have one question for you. The national media loves Texas right now. Yeah. Not everybody, but there's a lot of love, a lot more than we typically get. And I think, to Colin's point, when you look at the amount of quad 1 wins that Texas was able to secure right behind Kansas, we're battle tested. There's no question about that. And you combined us being battle tested with the senior and the experience. Is that, how do you feel about that as a Texas fan? Because I know we can be a little, weird about those things.
Yeah, we have, all the scabs all over us from the previous years, right? And those eventually tend to peel off over the course of a season for us. So I think that's just in the back of our minds, and it's not just in basketball. We know how this goes for most of our sports outside of swimming and diving, and Texas volleyball and women's basketball has done the same recently too. But from a national media perspective, it's kind of nice. I feel like we never get this kind of love from a basketball standpoint. So it's putting us on the map there. It's helping us, I think, long-term from a just national media perspective when we talk about recruiting. You look at some of the people who are putting us in the Final Four, and it's like, I don't know if that's, who I want having us in the Final Four. But, it's all part of it. But I think it's good that we're getting that love, and they're seeing just how we're playing recently, what we can be as a team and the depth.
Well, to your point, Kendrick Perkins put us in the Final
Four
today. So
that's what I was thinking of first.
Shout out to Big Perk.
Yeah.
Austin. So I want to start with you in terms of now looking at the bracket, the matchup that we have against Colgate, and just kind of what you're seeing and kind of how we match up, what we do well, what we struggle with, and kind of to tell the tape from your perspective, my man.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's been super fun. Obviously, every game texting you guys and feeling what y'all think about the program and stuff. It just feels like we've kind of gone through a gauntlet as well. It's been a really fun ride, and I mean, honestly, I can't believe it's almost over. We're starting March Madness, but yeah, my gut reaction yesterday, seeing the 2 line, I wasn't surprised that we were a 2 seed. I was honestly surprised Texas A&M was a 7. But when I saw them at a 7, I think I texted you guys immediately and I said, here it comes, we're going to be that 2. And sure enough, I think that's what everybody wants. But there is something in the way, and that's Colgate, obviously. A good team. They've lost once, since January 1st. And really, if you kind of look at who they have, they get it done in a bevy of ways. Obviously, they're the most efficient 3-point shooting team in the country. you can take that with a grain of salt if you want, or you can look at it for what it is. They can put the ball in the basket. They're not really led by anybody. I'm looking here, they're 6'5", 6'7", 6'7", 6'10". Tucker Richardson, Oliver Lynch Daniels, Ryan Moffitt, and Keegan Records. They all average anywhere between 11 and 14 a game. However, those four combined to shoot 52% from the field. So there's ways that they can win. Obviously, that's their offensive execution, their three-point shooting, cutting. They run a pretty offense, like we were talking off camera, Steven. You said a lot of it is, just get their guys open looks. However, to Colin's point, I don't know if they have faced any quad ones. I don't even know if Auburn was quad one when they played them. So I don't think they will be ready for the defense that Texas can bring. Obviously, we're going to talk about, everything Texas scouting later on. But yeah, the ways that they can win is if they get hot from three. They average about 19 assists a game. So it's catch and shoot. I mean, and if it's going in, it's almost like, I hate comparing them to Alabama. They're nowhere near Alabama caliber, but when Alabama's making threes, nobody's beating them. We've seen that. So I don't know. I would kind of compare them to almost like a great value Alabama. When it's going in, it's going in. They've made, between Lynch Daniels and Ryan Moffitt I have here, they've made 149 threes. So that's a lot of points. And then touching really quickly how they can lose, their defensive rebounding, their free throw rate, and their free throw accuracy. They're just not very good in all of those categories per KenPom. Just kind of lackadaisical in that area. But they've had some good wins. Season sweep of Navy, early win over Syracuse, but they've had some bad losses too. We talked about it off camera. Lost to American. They lost to Auburn by almost 30. So anyway, they're very efficient. They're a smart basketball team. But like Colin said, I don't know if even Auburn is the toughest competition they've played. Maybe it was a bad night, but you like Texas's chances in this. Obviously, a 2 and a 15 is what it is. It can happen. It's rare, but me personally, I think you guys would agree. I feel pretty confident about Texas, coming out of the gates. And like I told you guys, if Texas plays like they did against Kansas in this last game, I mean, there's, you guys know,
that's a Final Four team.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they play like that, that's a Final Four. That's what a Final Four team looks like, especially against the opponent. And Austin, to the point of matchup, because I want to kind of get, everybody chiming in here of how you broke this down. I really think that timing is everything. And what I mean by that is Timmy Allen not playing in the Big 12 tournament might have been the best thing that happened to Dylan Dessou and Christian Bishop, because they had to grow up offensively and do some things in the front court that normally Timmy Allen's the one facilitating and doing. And I think Texas's depth has improved from that standpoint, where I didn't see us having those same scoring droughts that we've seemed to have intermittently throughout the season. So having those guys be more immersed into the offensive flow, I think will all in turn put pressure on people to also score with us. So we were, I believe, Colin, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we led the Big 12 in scoring this year, or points per game. So when I start thinking about, we've hung our hat in this whole era since, when Chris Beard got here last year, and now through Rodney Terry, we've hung our hat defensively. And I think as long as we have those same defensive principles on the perimeter, and we respect their shooters, and we play hard and trap where we need to in certain opportunities, and we're willing to adjust where we need to, we will put a lot of pressure on them, akin to a Virginia Tech we saw last year that shot the hell out of the basketball in the ACC tournament and got themselves in there. And we were able over time to kind of smother them. I see the same thing for Colgate. Y'all, chime in. Correct me if I'm wrong here in terms of how I'm seeing this play out.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Steven. I mean, when you take a look at just kind of the defensive side of the ball, Colgate has not seen a team that can defend like our guys can. That's going to be huge in terms of, obviously, if you're able to shoot, 50%, 40%, kind of within their conference, that's how you win games. That's obviously how you get to the NCAA tournament. But, this is not the Patriot League, right? This is the Big 12 conference. This is the team that's had to play Kansas twice, Baylor twice, Kansas State twice, Iowa State twice, TCU twice, West Virginia twice. All 7 of those teams are in the tournament. Nobody else from that Patriot League is hanging out in the NCAA tournament. So I think the biggest difference is kind of that athleticism that we'll have. Even from a guy like Arterio Morris, there are going to be few guys that, Colgate has played throughout the year. And talking about a guy who really stepped up in the Big 12 tournament, that they have not seen a guy his size with his athletic ability. And that's our freshman, right? You can say the same thing about Dylan Mitchell. Those aren't the experienced guys. Those aren't the guys who have played multiple years in the NCAA tournament, know what that environment is like, and have had to play really probably, what is it, the 10th toughest schedule in America or something like that. So I really do think we have a lot of positives to take kind of going into the game against them. And when you kind of take a look at the experts, right, this is NCAA tournament, this is March Madness, but ultimately people are running thousands of simulations. I think most folks have us winning by 13 to 15 points. So ultimately we kind of just take a look at who we're playing, who we are as kind of a program, and obviously kind of the momentum we have from the tournament. This should be a game that we can go out and win pretty easily, in my opinion.
Yeah, one quick thing, Colin. I just looked. They're 177 in 3-point defense per KenPom, and they're 195 in free throws made. So they don't get to the line, and they don't defend the three at all.
Yeah, I think if we can hit shots, and obviously out athleticism, teams like a Colgate, which you have to really do kind of early on in the tournament. Everybody can get hot. They could shoot 50% from three, but if you look at it, if we can go out and out athleticism them, make them foul us getting to the cup, that kind of will take away a lot of the error that is maybe an outlier of somebody shooting really hot from deep or really anywhere on the floor.
I want to kick over to Ryan real quick, but one other thing I want to add is a common thing you see in early round games in the NCAA tournament where matchups like this could potentially get scary for you is when you're not responsible with the basketball, right? And you start having uncharacteristic turnovers, their early nerves there where it's like, we should be out here running on these guys. And next thing you know, Colgate hits a few threes, they get hot and they start looking like how they play. I really do believe, too, the experience factor. Marcus Carr has been in the tournament. Tyrese Hunter was, made some money in his name in the tournament last year. So Jabari Rice and what he did in New Mexico State. I mean, really, outside of Terrio, who has come on, I'm so happy Colin mentioned Terrio and some of those youthful guys actually grow up later in the year. We've seen recently in college basketball that it wasn't clicking for them early. But those are things that Texas is, Rodney Terry, the coaching staff, as well as the veteran guys, Timmy Allen coming back, just have to be mindful of not, because we had some scary moments against Virginia Tech last year. But that veteran aspect and, all right, guys, let's lock up these next 10 minutes and, get up out of here. Any closing thoughts on the Colgate matchup, Brian, or anything else you want to add before we look at the broader view of the bracket?
Yeah, I would say just to validate what you just said, 16 to 11 assist to turnover ratio for the season. So when you're in the positive on that, that's going to put you in any basketball game and a chance to win it. The last two things I'll tag on to what Colin mentioned. I think the optics of these last few games have been awesome to see. Us probably working over 50% of our offensive possessions through the post, which is typically not how we operate, right? We're very guard centric, but we're able to get these through the ball, get Christian the ball inside and work off that. We had, I think, 3 or 4 backdoor cuts too, where we're cutting down the middle lane and we're laying it up with no one in front of us. Those are the possessions that get you really excited about how we play basketball. And then to what Colin said, getting other guys minutes, that's going to be helpful for the tournament. Terrio played awesome defensively. We also put on some pressure and I think got 3 or 4 10-second calls, which that's hard to do on the defensive side. So you look at that and us doing a little bit of, dare I say, havoc basketball. It does make for some awesome things on the defensive side. So really promising stuff going into the tournament.
Using Terrio's athleticism and picking up 3 quarters. I love it. Just something that throws people off rhythm. And some of the stuff he'll get called for a little handsy foul here or there because of his aggressiveness. But you see his athleticism using that on a defensive, side of things. That's another. I look at the tournament. How many different ways can you win? how many different ways can you play basketball and beat people? That's why some of the teams we'll look at later, the way I kind of look at it and pick, and I'm like, these teams aren't necessarily one-dimensional. And what Texas has shown me recently is, okay, we can play basketball a multitude of ways. And I feel more confident moving forward about our ability to execute regardless of the situation or what type of game it is. All right, we need to address the elephant in the room with the bracket. Texas A&M, Penn State. So that would theoretically be, if, assuming we handle our business against Colgate, we're looking at the winner of that Texas A&M Penn State game, a 7-10 matchup. Austin, you already kind of mentioned being how big of a surprise it was that A&M was the 7th seed. And we know just from a rivalry perspective, the storylines that are there, it seems all over these brackets, there's weird story, whether it's coaching storylines. I don't know if y'all have noticed a lot of these things, but there's a lot going on all over the brackets. Austin, I'll actually kick over to you since you brought it up. Are we going to play A&M, in your opinion? And what does that look like to you? Because that's a very dangerous matchup, regardless of our fandom here. Let's talk ball.
Yeah.
You know where I'm going with it.
Yeah, I actually have my bracket. I did not pick A&M to beat Penn State, and it's not so much of what A&M, it's just what I've seen out of Penn State. I mean, they ran off Brad Underwood's Illinois team. They took Purdue to the wire. I just think, there's some people's dark horse to win it all. I just think Penn State's really talented. However, if I'm wrong, which we're all going to be wrong about several of these picks, obviously that's going to be the all eyes matchup, probably the evening game. It's kind of like what Colin said, with the Big 12 being such a meat grinder, you look at these other conferences and there's just some anomalies. It's like, well, you look at a team like Oklahoma, who Texas handled. Well, they beat the number 1 overall seed in this tournament by 20 plus points. So is Oklahoma 20 points better than Alabama? I doubt it, but on that day they were, right? So it's just so tough, and that's the beauty of this tournament, is you're playing teams that you don't normally play. Rivalry aside, A&M is a talented basketball team. They faltered early, but they just ran through SEC play, and you got to give them their flowers there. As bad as Texas fans don't want to hear that, it's just the truth. They've earned every bit of their 7 seed. Like I said, I believe they should be seated higher, but if it does come down to that, I kind of agree with what you said, Stephen. I really think, what they flashed a graphic the other day on in the semifinals against Oklahoma State, just the combined starts that all of the Texas players have. It's so many minutes and meaningful games, so many tournament appearances, and I don't know if A&M has that. Obviously, I just think the experience factor is such a big deal in the tournament. So, it's college basketball. Anything can happen. We would cross that bridge when we get there, but there is so many other storylines. I'm sure we'll get to a ton of them, but for what it's worth, I don't have A&M beating Penn State just because of what I've seen. That's one of the 10-7s that I do have, but would I be surprised? Absolutely not.
I want to kick to Ryan and then Colin on this. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I would say it turned out to be a disservice, I think, to all 3 teams, Penn State, A&M, and UT, when you talk about the implications of them being a 7 seed, as them being 25th in KenPom and the way they played towards the end of the year. Me and Colin talked about this yesterday. What hurt them and why they were 7 are 2 things, I think. One, that book that they wrote to the NCAA last year. You can't forget that when they were snubbed from the tournament. I think they had 6 of the same committee members as part of that. People remember stuff. And then the second is in the championship game, them just not playing well. Up until then, they had been playing great basketball, and I started watching them because of the tournament. And, they looked good, really, like a really good basketball team. And so I think the combination of those 2 things is why they sat at a 7, but it still was wrong. Like, I'm just as much of a rival as it, like you said, but if you're just talking about purely basketball, A&M's a 5, at least, from that perspective. And, Penn State has to deal with that first round. And then there's the implications after for us for being what the NCAA is calling the, 6th best overall team, seeded team. So you're giving us a team that finished runner-up in the SEC with some really good basketball teams. So those are the 2 things with me that struck me there. That was kind of, a little bit of a downer, but it is what it is. You got to roll the ball out and play.
All right, real quick. Do you have A&M beating Penn State?
I do.
Okay. We might get back to that, but I just want to get you on there. Colin, jump in.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Texas A&M basketball team, the seeding is a compilation of everything that you've done this year, right? You take a look at what they were at the start of the year. You can't lose to Murray State. You can't lose to Colorado. Can't lose to Boise State, despite them also being in the tournament. And then Memphis early, who is not a good basketball team, and you lost at home to Wofford. If you just put those losses throughout the season, you're kind of looking at this team a little bit differently. My take on the SEC may be a little bit different than some folks, but I think it's actually a very weak basketball conference this year. That you could take a look at Alabama, number 1 overall seed. They have great players. They're very long, but they rely on the three a lot. And that's one of the reasons that they, beat Alabama at home to end the year. When you take a look at the rest of the SEC, I don't really think you have a lot of great teams. Sans Missouri. Missouri, I think, was the only other team in college basketball to have over like 6 or 8 quad 1 wins and no quad like 2, 3, or 4 losses or something like that. So they're kind of the other anomaly. The rest of the teams I don't think are very good. However, if you take a look at kind of their broad momentum, they're playing very good basketball at the end of the year, despite that last game against Alabama in the championship game. And that can go a long way in terms of what the team has actually grown to be over the year. I do have them beating Penn State. I think their front court is better than Penn State's, and I think their guards are actually more experienced and better than Penn State's as well. Can it go either way? Yes, I think this spread is 2 or 3, but I do kind of have the Aggies, despite obviously every bone in my body hating Texas A&M, going into the next round as well, playing us.
So I have a little different perspective here in regards to how this impacts Texas. I think if things end up going the way that Austin just laid out, in terms of if Penn State were to pull this off and Texas plays Penn State, on paper, Texas should beat Penn State. However, the tournament is weird and things never go the way they're supposed to go. I actually would feel more comfortable playing A&M because I know we would be everybody's attention be all hands on deck. I don't want this feeling of we're getting let off the hook. And it's little things. It's I know we're a veteran team. I just said all that, just gave them their flowers for everything they've done. I just feel like if we play Penn State for whatever reason, we wouldn't have that same locked in focus that we would against A&M. I'm not afraid to play A&M. Very good basketball team, but I know how my team plays when, we have those type of challenges. It's a very weird dynamic. I think that's something, you're looking at from a standpoint of, they also want to do this for Rodney Terry and the fans and all that type of stuff. I could sense if they're playing Penn State, a tinge of letdown, or they get off slow, or at this point in the tournament, yes, everybody should be fired up, motivated, regardless of the opponent. But we know that's not how it always works. So that's my 2 cents there, hot take, if you will. I actually think we would be more serious if we played A&M, but that's just me. The rest of this bracket, Houston, number 1 seed in our region in the Midwest. They are trying to get to Houston to cut down the nets for Kelvin Sampson. And, I actually don't mind their path. There's some really interesting teams in there. How does the rest of the bracket break down for you guys, just overall, or, what type of path looks like for Texas? We'll kind of leave it a little open. Colin, I'm gonna come back to you on this one.
Yeah, I think when we were watching the show yesterday, and obviously Texan Run was over at my place as well, there was no gift for Alabama being that number 1 overall seed. Man, first of all, Maryland and West Virginia are both big and play very, very good defense, in my opinion. You take a look at, Creighton is a team who, was rated very, very highly at the beginning of the year, had some injuries, especially to their center, Ryan Kalkbrenner. You saw that team play at Texas. We beat them at home. NC State also has some big guys who I think can kind of play in that region as well. Baylor, who guard-led, Flo Famba, as well as Everyday John's back in the lineup. And then Utah State can really score the basketball. I touched on Missouri being, one of those only teams that have a bunch of quad 1 wins and no, quad 2, 3, 4 losses. And then you take a look at a team like Arizona, who, if Kirk Reese is healthy, you take a look at a guy like Courtney Ramey, who had the kind of game-winning shot for them against UCLA in the Pac-12 tournament.
Shout out to Ramey.
It's absolutely brutal. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to win, the 4 or 5 games it really takes to get even to the national championship or the Final Four. So I was taking a really kind of hard look at that region. And then, you kind of have a Virginia team who's down this year as well. But that's, also a team to take a look at. So that's kind of the region of death for me.
Is the South region. He's looking at the South region right now. I've seen a lot of people picking Furman. That seems to be a popular 13/4 pick, picking Furman over the Virginia Cavaliers. So something to pay attention to out there. I actually feel okay about Bama, me personally. I just like their front court ability to score. I feel like they could make the argument they have the best player in the tournament. Their guard play has been better to me over the back stretch of the season. So I do feel good about Bama, but your point regarding that bottom half of the bracket, Utah State, correct me if I'm wrong, they're top 20 in KenPom overall. And they come from a very underrated conference in the Mountain West, where there's several teams in this tournament that come from that conference that are no joke and that play different styles. Like San Diego State, for example, is a hard contrast from Utah State, but like they're right there as a 5 seed. You know what I mean? And so looking at these teams, I think it's very interesting, that bottom half of the bracket. I don't know if Arizona's going to make it to Alabama, quite frankly, so really, really curious. Ryan, where you fall on all this, man?
Yeah, I think the South, I would agree, I think is probably the toughest region. I look at the bottom of the West bracket, those 4 games that happen, TCU and then the winner of Arizona State, Nevada. Arizona State beat Arizona at the buzzer beater at home, but I think both of those teams are capable to give TCU a tough game, especially with TCU being without Big Eddie. That's a big loss for them. I'm not sure if he's coming back. We haven't really seen anything on that. You look at that
I saw he entered the portal.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's gone.
There's your answer. And then you look at the next game. So Gonzaga, Grand Canyon, I expect Gonzaga to handle that pretty well. But then that second round matchup, potentially TCU Gonzaga, is a very interesting matchup for a 6-3 matchup, where that could be an upset too, with how TCU can play when they're playing well and Mike Miles is doing what he does. Then those bottom 2 games in the West, you have Northwestern, Boise State. I have Boise State over Northwestern. That would be another 7-10 switch right there. And then we talked about this before we got on. UCLA, as a 2 seed, they're missing one of their top players. UNC Asheville is a interesting one because there's a little bit of context there. The player of the year in that conference who plays for UNC Asheville, Drew Pember, was a transfer from Tennessee. Very good basketball player, and I think he may be a storyline that's going to stick if they do make some noise. So I wouldn't completely just ride that game off. I think there's some interesting dynamics there. And then, of course, Mike Morrell is the head coach there at UNC Asheville. I think, he's there as a head coach. So a little Texas ties there with Shaka Smart. So that group getting to the second round and then potentially having a UCLA TCU Sweet 16 or a Gonzaga UCLA Sweet 16 is exciting to me, at least in the West region.
Austin, what you got, man?
Yeah, I'm gonna go out east. Man, there's all kinds of stuff for me. Do I dare pick, the 30-4 Oral Roberts over, the infamous Duke, who's finally got their team back? They're clicking on all cylinders, but I mean, I don't know. How do you doubt Max Abmas and 7'5" Connor Vanover, averaging almost 15 a game? I don't know. It's a close one. I think I've erased and re-erased my pick on that, I think 4 times today. I don't know. It seems just asinine just picking Oral Roberts, but man, I don't care what league you're in. You win 30 games, you're a good team. So that's interesting to me. Obviously, Kansas State, if they could potentially meet Kentucky in the round of 32, that would be super intriguing. Obviously, Coach Cal, in March is that speaks for itself. And then Jerome Tang, you guys know how much of a thorn in Texas's side Kansas State was at times this year. Just a super, super tough team, and they starts with their backcourt who they have. But obviously, I know Purdue. You guys know Purdue very well. Obviously, dating back to last year with Edie, and obviously, thank goodness Jaden Ivey's gone. But that team was a problem, and I still believe they are a problem. But man, the East is really tough to me. I mean, and don't even sleep on Florida Atlantic. 31-3, ran through Conference USA. I was actually at that tournament. It was up here in Frisco, and just watching them play was really, really fun to see. And I don't think they would upset a Purdue, but some people are really high on Memphis, a team that just knocked off Houston without Sasser in there, obviously. But the East is really loaded to me. Tennessee, I know they've had their ups and downs. They made us look really silly in Knoxville, and that was a team where I think I remember texting you guys. I'm like, man, this Tennessee team, like, don't sweat this loss. They're for sure an Elite Eight team, but they look a little different now. So the East is really, really scary to me. I'm glad Texas is not out there, but I've gone back and forth, and then I would be remiss if I do not bring up Coach Smart and the Marquette squad that he has rolling there. I mean, really not a whole lot else to say other than he's just won. I mean, 28-6, and that conference is, it speaks for itself. And, you can doubt them if they want. And I wouldn't even write them out yet against Vermont. The Catamounts are a scary, scary squad. Shoot the ball very well, too. So the East is that region where no matter what time those games are, I'm going to be, trying my best to be glued to the TV for all those guys. So
I want to touch on Coach Smart, and then I want to go to this Duke Oral Roberts game because I've been paying a lot. That one's under smell test evaluation right now. With shocking what he's done, winning the Big East outright in the regular season, then they win the tournament in Madison Square Garden. The UConn game was one of the best games I saw all season. That was intent, like the intensity. And UConn, a lot of people dark horse pick to make some noise and potentially go to the Final Four. Creighton is a team I really, really like. And, Xavier, all these Big East teams, I mean, no disrespect, they have been a phenomenal conference, even above some of the, I would say probably above the ACC this year, and maybe even the Pac-12 in terms of overall performance. With Shaka in particular, he's had success in this tournament, minus Texas, and he has had the worst of moments. I think the biggest thing with him is, like we saw in the Big East tournament, it's a momentum thing. It's going to be a crazy game like he had with St. John's, right? They almost got picked off by St. John. I think they went to overtime or whatever. If he's able to get the win, Shaka's the type of person with his energy and how it's infectious, then he can make it go. But at Texas, we saw us be on the other end of that, whether it was the Northern Iowa game, dare we bring up Abilene Christian, where, we're not able to get past that first hump. It's kind of like being on a 2-minute drill. The most important series is getting the first down to get yourself going. That's how I look at Shaka Smart. And I feel like there's a lot of teams in this region that are this or that teams. Duke or Roberts. Duke, for example, in my opinion, either they're going to lose to Oral Roberts or they're going to go and beat Purdue and go off. I don't feel like there's any in between with this Duke team, because this Oral Roberts situation, like you mentioned with Vanover, Max Abmas, Oral Roberts has recently had success in the tournament. Duke's young. I like Jeremy Roach, with his experience from last year, and their Twin Towers up there, but they're babies. And so they're feeling good about themselves winning the ACC tournament, but I want to see how this plays out against a 30-win team. And I feel like there's a lot of this. Tennessee is a this or that team. Kentucky's a this or that team. I would not be surprised if Kentucky won the region. But I would not be surprised if they lost to Providence. There's a bunch of teams in that East region. There's a bunch of landmines there. So just my general thoughts there. I have the Oral Roberts thing under evaluation, though, fellas. So, any other comments you want to do on the? Go ahead,
to
Colin.
That point, I'll go into the East too, because I have that exact same kind of mindset. When you look at a team like Memphis that just beat Houston, that team can win the entire region if it wanted to. You take a look at a team like Duke. that team can win the region. Kyle Filipowski, Jeremy Roach, Proctor, Lively, those guys are very, very good basketball players. And if they put it together, they can beat literally anyone on any given day. I have Providence beating Kentucky. And that goes back to my conference thing I was talking about earlier. I think the SEC is an overrated basketball conference this year. And I think the Big East is an underrated basketball conference this year. UConn got a 4 seed, and UConn was the 4th rated, 10-pom team in kind of the nation this year. That team can go win a championship. I think if you take a look at Marquette and the players they had, what Shaka Smart are you going to get? Are you going to get VCU Shaka Smart, where it's energy? You can kind of basically not really get the coaching aspect of it. It's getting those players ready to play every game and them going and winning. Or are you going to get the Texas Shaka Smart, where you're trying to coach too much and then you get out-coached by an Abilene Christian University, right? So if you take a look at that East bracket, there are basically any team. Memphis could go beat Purdue, Duke could go beat Purdue, Duke could beat Memphis. And we're just forgetting about Jerome Tang and Kansas State. Nobody really mentioned, how good that team is when they're clicking as well, and how well coached that team can be. They have turnover problems that if they, could take care of the ball, they could get out of that region as well. So I think that region, very similar to the South, is pretty wide open.
A lot of parity this year for sure.
No, so I was going to say, any other fun games we have left that we want to touch on, and Final Four predictions, and then we'll touch on the RT storyline.
Yeah, just some advice. And my bracket has not been good ever, just like all of us. But if there's 2 things I heard this, if you're looking at a matchup and you're like, man, I don't know which team to pick, just remember 2 things. A wise man once told me this. Number 1 is coaching matters in this tournament tremendously. And 2, can they score the ball? And I know that's 2 very, very broad things, but if you maybe need a thought or 2 to provoke you making a decision one way or another, just remember coaching matters a ton in this tournament. And then at the end of the day, can they score the ball? So there's that.
Austin, your boy Brad. Who we pick? Are we picking Illinois? That's the most ADHD game on the bracket right now, my friend. Is Arkansas, Illinois. I have no idea what to do with that.
Absolutely. I'm riding with Brad. I just think they're a tougher team. I think, it's a Texas team that, or an Arkansas team that got beat up by Texas preseason. And they might lose in March, but I promise you there's one thing about a Brad Underwood coach team is they're not going to be out physical. There's no way. And like Colin said, I just don't know if that SEC style of play matches up with the Big Ten. And we know this better than anybody. If Matthew Meyer gets hot, nobody's beating Illinois. So, I had to throw that in there. But, I think guys like Shannon and Meyer and, Coleman Hawkins and guys like that, I just think that's a team that is pissed off right now, and almost an Arkansas team that's kind of reeling a little bit. If you just kind of saw the way they handled their loss to A&M in Nashville last week, just 2 teams in kind of different spots right now. It's going to be back and forth. Musselman wins in March, but I'm going to ride with Brad, no doubt.
That game is the highest probability of the coaches getting in a fight.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
By far. That's the highest probability for some double technicals. Absolute chaos. All right, let's get to the big stuff, the predictions. I'll actually go first on my Final Four. So out of the South region, I actually am going to stick with Alabama, the number 1 overall seed. I have Brandon Miller under surveillance for my San Antonio Spurs. If we are not blessed with one Victor Wembanyama. And I just feel as though it's the same type of storyline. I mean, I do think when they're hitting on all cylinders, they are the best team. I have my questions about Nate Oates at times and just some of those things, but the last back end of the season, the guards, the way they've shot the basketball, the way that they have been able to play different ways in their front court defensively. I love how active their bigs can be. So I'm going to stick with Alabama out of the South region. And then out of the East region, I'm rolling with Shaka. on this one. I don't feel good about it, but Purdue seems fraudulent to me after a certain point. And all of these Jekyll Hyde teams. The thing about Marquette that I like with Shaka is Tyler Kolek at point guard. And I like how their bigs play as well and how multiple Marquette has been. And I think that there's real momentum there, having a grown-up being his point guard and kind of controlling the situations. And I like how they are end of game situations. Going over to the Midwest, this is hard, fellas, because I do have a Texas-Houston showdown. And it's really difficult for me. And I know if I pick Texas, they're not going to make it. So I have to pick Houston. And I'm picking Houston to get to Houston. It hurts. I think Sasser's going to come back healthy. Maybe not first round game, but I think he'll be back. And Kelvin Sampson, they were close last year in that Elite Eight. And you know, how that all, and they didn't I don't think they had Sasser last year in that situation. So I am picking Houston out of the Midwest. And out of the West, I'm actually going to go Gonzaga. I do think we are going to get a Gonzaga UCLA matchup down there at the bottom of the bracket. And, you know, shout out to Coach Self and getting back healthy. I want to give a shout out to Kansas and everything. But I do have Mark Few, Drew Timme. I don't think that's the last we've heard from Drew Timme. I think he actually is going to get back to the Final Four. And I like the way Strawther and some of those other guys have been playing as of recent. So I have Gonzaga, Houston, Alabama, and Marquette. In the Final Four, I have Houston winning the national championship. Those are my picks right now. Who's next?
I'll go. Take a look at the South bracket. Again, I think this is the toughest region, but I do have chalk here. I have Alabama beating Arizona, kind of in that Elite Eight matchup. I think the biggest thing here is that Arizona can absolutely beat that Alabama team. They do have the front court to kind of hang with some of the length that Alabama has. You take a look at Tubelis, you take a look at Follow, and they do have a fantastic backcourt, but I do have Alabama winning. I think it really comes down to who is the best player, right? Not only just, you know, in their conference, but kind of in the country. You take a look at Zach Edey and Brandon Miller. I would much rather have a guard best player than a big man best player in college basketball. And so in my mind, that takes away Zach Edey. I think that takes away Trace Jackson Davis at Indiana. I think that takes away Timme and Gonzaga. I think they're just a little bit thin in terms of depth this year. But that does promote people like Brandon Miller. That promotes people like Jalen Wilson, Jaime Jaquez at UCLA, Jalen Pickett at Penn State, Marcus Sasser, obviously, in Houston. And then kind of a dark horse for me is Kendrick Davis over at Memphis. Moving on to the East, I actually have Duke beating Kansas State in my Elite Eight game. So it'll be an Alabama and Duke Final Four matchup in Houston. This is by far kind of the biggest parity region I have. A lot of upsets. Providence over Kentucky. I actually have Michigan State over Marquette. Memphis beating Florida Atlantic, then beating Purdue, and then Duke taking care of Tennessee and then Memphis. Taking a look at the Midwest. So very similar to you, Steve, I have a Houston, Texas Elite Eight as well. Some snippets here. I actually have Iowa State and us playing in that Sweet 16 game. I have Kent State beating Indiana. This is a Kent State team that barely lost to Gonzaga, and I believe barely lost to another highly rated team. I think it was Houston actually early on in the season as well. And I actually do have us beating Houston. I think the strength of schedule contributes to that, as well as just kind of the experience that these guys have. And then lastly, kind of taking a look at the West region, I have UConn beating TCU in my Elite Eight matchup to set up a Texas-Connecticut Final Four in Houston. I actually do have Connecticut beating us. I think Adama Sanogo would be a little bit too much for us kind of inside. I think if we get into foul trouble, we're in real trouble. And then I have Alabama beating UConn in the national championship. So quite a bit of parity kind of running around in college basketball this year, kind of reflected in a lot of my bracket choices, but just really looking forward to my Christmas in March. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Amen, brother. I love it, Colin. You got us going to Houston for the Final Four. I will kick it over to Austin, and then we'll do Ryan last.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Out of the South, I actually don't have Alabama, strictly for the reason I don't think you can win 5 straight tournament games, strictly relying on the 3-ball. I could be very dead wrong, and if I am, I'll own it. But I just think the streaky shooting, especially in this tournament type setting, we saw it last year from this group. I just don't think you can do it five times to get there, 6 times to win it. So I have Arizona. And just the experience that those guys have coming out of the South. Over to the East, I actually do have Purdue, strictly because of Zach Edey and just the steadiness of that team. I know they've kind of had a little bumpy road here lately, but while they only shoot like 4 or 5 threes a game, they're plus 13 in rebounding margin, and I know a ton of that is Edey. I just think, having been around a March Madness and how little time you really have to prepare from game to game and really, round to round, I just think Edey is so much of a problem to prepare for in a short turnaround time, if that makes sense. You get a team that's never experienced a 7-footer, much less a 7-footer that can move and be agile around the basket. I just think he's the glue, but obviously he's the straw that stirs their drink too. So I have Arizona out of the South, Purdue out of the East. Steven, I have the exact same thing as you. Out of the Midwest, I have Houston and Texas in the Elite Eight, and same logic. If I pick Texas, there's no way they're going to win. I think that Houston defense is for real, especially if Sasser gets back. So I do have Houston defeating the Longhorns to get to the Final Four. And then, unless Ryan comes from left field, I have a very unpopular pick amongst this group of guys. I actually am picking Kansas to come out of the West.
Okay, I thought you were gonna pick Brad for a second, brother. I was
no. No, love Brad, but no, I actually have Kansas. I just think we've seen this Kansas team very closely, obviously twice in the last 9 days. I don't think on paper Texas is 40 points better than Kansas. I think Texas has just played really well. I just think Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick and those guys are just going to heat up when it matters, just like they did last year. And with Bill Self and all his stuff, the guys want to rally around him and get it done for him. And I'm not going to say they're going to repeat. I actually have Purdue winning it all in my bracket, but I think Kansas and Gonzaga in my Elite Eight. I know Drew Timme is a problem, but I just think that Gonzaga gas will run out a little bit. So I have Arizona, Purdue, Houston, and Kansas, with Purdue beating Houston in the final.
So Austin, you got the young freshman guards and Coach Matt Painter.
Yep,
cutting down
absolutely.
the nets in Houston.
Yeah, I liked what I saw last year. I liked what I've seen, just this year with the steadiness. When Edey is on, quite literally nobody can stop him. Like I said, if I'm wrong, I'll own it, but they just seem so steady to me, and they're just a problem to prepare for. So.
And he's probably going to be your Wooden Player of the Year.
Yeah, you gotta think so, right? I mean, there's some other names, but nobody's done, especially on the offensive end. I mean, he's like 13 offensive boards a game. That's not even defensive boards. So yeah, just a monster, great player.
Very good, very good. And Ryan, I'll pass it to you to close us out.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to be the Wooden Award winner, but when you're able to, hang in the paint for 10 seconds at a time, it helps you out a little bit. We can talk about
that. That's
nasty.
He's bringing up the 14-second video that's gone viral.
Yeah,
He's just standing in the paint.
Even if you touch it resets, but we'll talk later.
Yeah. I agree with Austin. We were pretty close, almost on 3 of them. So I'm going to go Arizona over Alabama in the Elite Eight. I think, Colin, you make some great points on why Arizona is going to win. I think they have the bigs to match up well. I think their shooting's good. I think overall they are the more talented team across the board, and depth. I think depth is key in the tournament to have that. We always hear these 6 or 7, guys who are playing well in the tournament. I think they just have more depth, and I watched that whole Alabama-Oklahoma game, and I cannot get that out of my head, how it was Brandon Miller versus, and none of the other guys contributed. And to Austin's point, I don't think they're going to be able to shoot that way the entire tournament. So I have Arizona coming out there. Out of the East, I actually have a blue blood matchup in the Elite Eight with Duke and Kentucky. I think, Stephen, to your point, Duke is either going to lose in the first round or they're going to go all the way. I think that holds true. And I think Kentucky's getting hot at the right time too. They're a talented bunch. They were talked about a little bit at the beginning of the year, but just sort of faded. To Colin's point, a weaker conference potentially. So maybe that's why they were able to turn it on. But I do think that they're going to be able to get to the Elite Eight. And I do have Duke winning that game to play Arizona in that Southeast matchup. Out of the Midwest, I think we're all in agreement here. U of H and Texas in the Elite Eight. I picked with my heart in this bracket, as I always will, and I have Texas beating U of H. I think, again, the depth, the experience, obviously Sasser is going to be the best player in that game, but don't count out how we've been playing of late, and if we continue to roll, I think it gives us a good shot in that game. Out of the West, I actually have Kansas over TCU in the Elite Eight. I think we're going to see both of those teams make a run with just the depth of the Big 12. I think, like you mentioned, Jalen Wilson, Grady Dick, having an experienced point guard is also important. Like Colin said, having better guard play is important, I think, at the end of the day versus bigs. That would be my worry with Kansas when they get to the Final Four to play us, is their size is not really there, and I think we can take advantage of that again. So in my final, I have Arizona playing Texas, the Courtney Ramey revenge game, but Texas wins that game and wins the title. But if I had to not pick with my heart, I would be going Kansas all the way if I went that.
Fun question.
I would pay significant dollars to watch Alabama and Arizona play, because it'd be like lighting all of their shorts on fire and just lighting the ball on fire as well. That game is going to be up and down, up and down, up and down for 40 minutes of basketball. That will be a lot of fun to watch.
If your prediction came true, Ryan, I don't know if you guys know this. Has Bill Self ever been beat 3 times in 1 year before?
That's a good question.
I doubt it.
Does the second loss count, or does that
go? I don't know. Has Kansas lost to any opponent 3 times in 1 year?
Yeah, probably not. That's a good point.
I do want to add one thing to the Kentucky point. I do factor, this is just me personally, I do factor in when you get embarrassed the year before. I do factor that in. And the St. Pete, we can't just ignore the St. Peter's thing from last year. And I just have a feeling Coach Cat, damn, we gonna lose in the first round 2 years in a row, which very well could happen, especially playing Providence. That's not a St. Peter's type situation. But when I look at teams, that's one thing I'm thinking about, even with the whole Iowa-Auburn matchup. Iowa just had that nasty loss in the first round last year. I remember when Virginia lost to UMBC, the very next year they go on to win the national championship. Sometimes those first round embarrassing situations go and really fuel a team and ignite, especially when there's still a lot of those guys and pieces that came back. So just something to pay attention to, in my opinion.
And you just made me literally change my pick as we speak from Kentucky Providence. I switched it back to Kentucky. So thank you for that.
They do have the Wooden Warrior winner last year, and Shigwe, I believe he won it last year, was one of the top players. So you can't overlook him. And then they do have young guards, but Savion Wheeler's a veteran guy, and Toppin and Cason Wallace have been playing well lately. So never know. Yeah, but it's a good point.
If they lose in the first round 2 years in a row, that's nasty, Coach Cal.
I won't ever pick them again. And I definitely wouldn't want Cal here.
All right. Well, we're going to make our RT discussion, if you fellas don't mind, a part 2, because we'll keep this one tournament talk, because I think the RT discussion and everything that's going on around the more long-term scenarios for Texas basketball deserves its own space. So we'll have part 2 coming for you guys. Remember, we are doing a tournament, so fill out your bracket, come hang out with us in the Fanatic Perspective subs group on ESPN. I'll have the link below. I'm going to blast it out on all the socials. We are partnered up with our sponsor, Last Stand Hats, laststandhats.com/fanatic. Use the promo code FANATIC10 at checkout. Get 10% off on all merch, apparel, the whole bit. But Last Stand Hats has been kind enough to say, hey, whoever wins the group or bracket competition, $50 to use on laststandhats.com, as well as a couple free hats. So why not? You can actually win something. So come hang out with us. Part 2's on the way. Guys, remember, all our Texas fans out there, horns always up.
Welcome, baby.
He would be really excited right now.